Penn State fans, it's Michigan week, one of Dave Jones's favorite weeks because he gets to talk about his favorite coach in the Big Ten. We'll get to that on this edition of the Blue White Breakdown. It's James Franklin Tuesday. We're going to react to some of the things he had to say. First of two podcasts. We might even have a special guest from PennLive, our sister site out in Michigan, on our Wednesday or Thursday podcast. We might have a special guest for you guys to give some insight on the Wolverines. But let's talk, Dave. Let's talk about a lot of things. I am in the midst of a street remodel right outside my house that's really been enjoyable the last 24 hours.
Is that what you call it? A street remodeling? I didn't know they called it that.
Yeah, that's what I'm calling it.
Are they using high-end materials? They upgrading? Marble, maybe?
It's UGI is updating they're updating the gas, I guess the gas system and the pipes, and everything has to go. It has
you go out and
now.
talk to the guys?
I talked to him yesterday.
I see you're using 20 gauge there, huh? Some of that kind of stuff. It's all ball bearings kind of stuff. I would pay to see you talking to heavy duty construction workers. Yeah. I would like that.
And they're jackhammering and they're digging a lot of holes. It is like the scene out of Caddyshack when the Gophers ran amok at Bushwood and just tore the place apart. Where I live in Harrisburg, it's a pretty prominent road, and they decided to remodel it and change some things this week, and it's going on literally right outside my house.
Well, Bob, it needed remodeled. That's infrastructure. No one wants to talk about infrastructure until it's your street. You know what I mean?
The one thing, if I could do it all over again, I would have loaded up on aspirin and Advil, because the jackhammering does eventually take its toll on your ears and your head. Anyway,
just means you're getting old. That's all.
It is. That's another way of looking at it. And I'm not drinking enough to kind
either that, or you're hungover. Yeah, you're not drinking enough, or not drinking or drinking too much. I don't know.
Yeah, I tried, Dave. So, Dave, we just heard from James Franklin a little while ago. Pretty straightforward press conference, I thought. But the one thing I just wanted to ask you about.
He's a little sensitive about that timeout, isn't he?
Yeah, and so there are trigger words for James Franklin. When he says something, he's going to get something off his chest. And Dave, have you picked up on it? Whatever he says, it's interesting. That is the trigger.
That's good. That's good. I didn't pick that up, and you're right.
Whenever he says something with, it's interesting. I think he's going to vent a little bit.
I think it's interesting when, the fans you're right.
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting, and then
work that into the routine. Yeah.
So,
what was the wording? The question wasn't. Nate Bauer asked about fourth down conversions, and whether the result affects future decisions. And he wanted to talk about that again. So, he goes, obviously the end of the half, Maryland played it very well, and you don't want to give them a chance to score. And the average tactic is to run it into a light box and maybe take a shot. So the timeout was well received by the fans and the media.
Dave, I just can't get over the fact that in the time it took for the game to be over and he got to the press conference, he got worked up in a lather about this. Somebody had to say something.
Was he looking at tweets? I mean,
I think somebody pointed him in the right direction, because he was clearly not happy in the post-game presser, and he revisited it again today. Like, I don't know, was he justifying it? But it just was a very strange possession that probably
Who
needed.
asked the question in the post-game? I can't think. Ben Jones? I don't want to be that guy.
I think it might have been Audrey.
No, it wasn't Audrey. He says, whoever said it said, I don't want to be that guy. I don't
Maybe it was Ben.
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah.
Anyway, anything else strike you about what he had to say?
Well, the Fred Hansard play, which really, I am really weary of people saying that's not who I am. Like Urban Meyer saying that's not who I am. Well, when people show you who they are, maybe that is who you are. But he kind of rationalized a little more for you don't have to drill into the ground, but Fred Hansard made you pointed it out. You saw it before I did on the sideline.
It looked like it was a pretty nice little shove there. I mean, it was premeditated to me.
It was the thing where you brace yourself when someone's running out of bounds. Yeah. It's really not even a shove as much as you make yourself. It's like setting a pick in basketball when you know the guy doesn't see you.
Sure.
And there's a line between setting a good pick and setting a crushing pick that's going to bust up the guy a little bit. And if you're playing pickup ball, you do that, and there's going to be a fight. I mean, there's going to at least be an argument. This was not pickup ball. This is along the sideline, and Fred Hansard isn't playing, and he basically just made himself a Greek column. And he's a big boy. He's a big guy, man. And Taulia Tagovailoa ran right into him. And, it was a dirty play. There's no question about it. I think you pointed that out during the game. And Franklin said the optics of it don't look good, but he's been a model student, athlete, and all that. And I don't think he had any intentions of hurting another player, is what he said. Well, maybe he didn't premeditate it. It's just something that can happen in the heat of battle. Okay. But, you do something like that to put a bruise on somebody. That's why you do it. Well, yeah, you are trying to kind of bang up the other guy. So he stopped at, it was a bad look, and there needs to be a reaction. Yeah, I don't like good look, bad look. I'm sick of that phrase too.
Yeah.
But there needed to be a reaction. So they suspended Hansard for the first half of Michigan, which, I don't know what that accomplishes, but
I don't think was even going to play in the first half.
He's not on the depth chart if there was a depth chart. But
Dave, as a noted basketball follower, Hall of Fame writer, I want to ask you this. Who did it better, Fred Hansard or Rick Mahorn when it comes to
You know who never got credit for the picks he set for Penn State fans is James Barnes. Oh my God. Now, I don't even know if you remember this guy, but he's 30 years ago played for the team that upset UCLA in the tournament. He set one of those against like Sean Tarver or somebody in that game at the Carrier Dome. And the whole crowd in the Carrier Dome went, ooh. It was, when you see one of those, if it's a guy that big, and James Barnes was 6'7" and 240 if he was a buck, you don't really have to lean into him too much. You just are there, and if the guy doesn't see you and your teammate doesn't say screen, you can really get hurt. So it was that kind of thing. I mean, Taulia Tagovailoa didn't see that coming. So you can get hurt, man.
Yeah. Shout out to early 1990s Penn State basketball. Well done, Dave. I like it. Rick Mahorn was a bad man when it came to setting picks, throwing elbows, and all that stuff for the bad boys.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of guys. He was
about as big as Fred Hansard, too.
There were a lot of the guys on that team, the bad boys, who would do that. But yeah. There have been a lot of guys through. John Amici could set a pick too, man.
Okay.
John, it takes a big guy with density. You know what I mean? Big bone guy. Have you ever done it? Have you run to a pick like that? You didn't see?
I have not.
It's like a
later this week. No, I have not.
It's the same reason they made crackback blocks illegal.
Sure.
Because if you don't expect it, you can't. You're helpless. And you can really mess up your head. You can get some scrambled eggs from that.
Yeah. Dave, I know we're going to talk about this during the matchup podcast, the second podcast we do, but I just all week, the thing that I'm going to be thinking about, and James said at the top of his press conference, look, Michigan's edgemen are no one to mess around with. Hutchinson and David Ojabo, they can wreck a game. They can take over a game. And if your offensive tackles don't have a good day, it's not going to be a good day for your team. And I know we will talk about it later, but I just think that matchup to me is going to go so far in determining the outcome of the game. I really like those two edge rushers that Michigan has. And I'm really trying to think of how Penn State, could kind of give, especially Caedan Wallace. I think Caedan Wallace is the more vulnerable of the two. He gave up another sack in the Maryland game where the guy just beat him right around the corner, easily got to Sean Clifford. I just don't know what, Mike Yurcich is going to do to give those guys help, because he cannot let those guys go one-on-one against Hutchinson and Ojabo, especially now, Dave, that Penn State's throwing the ball a ton. Like, they're not running the ball well, and the way things are going, I think Corey Geiger said Clifford's thrown it a combined 99 times in the last 2 games. And I mean, it's a recipe for disaster against those pass rushers.
Yeah, Hutchinson, there are 2 very different types of guys. Hutchinson is the big, so I think he's 6'6" and about 265, power defensive end who can both bull rush or speed rush, but he's better at bull rushing. Ojabo he had a move against Indiana. Not too many people probably watched the Indiana game, but I watch them all for the power poll. And he had a spin move that was, it was like James Brown, man. That's what I compared it to. It was incredible footwork. And, you were talking about Indiana's offensive tackles, who aren't the greatest, but and Penn State's offensive tackles have been pretty good pass blockers. They haven't run block very well, but they have pass blocked pretty well. He's going to be a problem because he is a much different player. He's more a hybrid linebacker defensive end than he is even a traditional defensive end. He can drop back into coverage, but he can put his hand in the ground and then really get off. He's bendy. So those 2 guys bring 2 completely different skill sets. And I think it's going to put a premium on first down passing. I think these days, somebody else asked the question, well, I guess it was Geiger, about, is it okay just to throw the ball 50 times a game these days? And I think it is, especially against these next 3 opponents. I don't think the establishing the running game thing even holds water anymore in today's football. Just throw, and especially throw on first down. Because you do not want to get into a situation of 2nd and long, especially 3rd and long against these guys. So Michigan's back 4 has not been great. They gave up a lot of yards against Michigan State. They're fine, but they're no big deal. I say just go at them right away and keep throwing. And wear them out and use speed. Use the speed you've been talking about in this game. This would be the time to do it.
Yeah, James, you could tell, though, James feels strongly that even if the run game isn't super productive, and let's be honest, the odds of it being super productive in the Michigan game aren't great, Dave. It's not great. But he thinks, though, just coming off the ball to try and wear them down physically for later in the game, he made a point of that when I asked him about Wallace and Walker, that sometimes that can help take some of the starch out of these pass rushers. I don't know if you feel that way, but he clearly does feel that way. So I wonder if maybe he will be in Mike Yurcich's ear a little bit this week about don't give up completely on the run just to try and tire those guys out. So we'll see.
The point's well taken that you take some juice out of, I think it's more speed rushing defensive end. So maybe Ojabo more than Hutchinson. Hutchinson's not going to be affected by that at all. He's a powerful guy. He's used to going 30 minutes or more. I don't think it's going to affect him. He's a 3-down defensive end. To me, it's the other way. Do you remember? I know we've tried to forget the Ticket City Bowl against Houston. Case Keenum. But you remember that Penn State pass rush was supposed to be, pretty lethal. And they took their legs away just throwing quick passes, speed tempo all the time. I think can be just as effective. And I believe that's the way to go because, look, we've seen the Penn State running game. It's not getting better. Mm-hmm. We're in the final 4th of the season. Is it going to get better now? No. Why bother? Don't try to do something you don't do well. Accentuate your positives, limit your negatives. That's the way I look at it.
I think that game was 30-14.
30-14, correct.
Penn State, Penn State had to, I'm sorry I'm laughing about this. I think you're going to laugh about it too. I just remember that was the 2011 season where at the end it was just a complete, it was a disaster for a lot of reasons. It was the Paterno scandal, the Sandusky scandal, all of it. Tom Bradley was the interim coach, but Penn State had to start Rob Bolden because Matt McGloin got punched out in the locker room by
I forgot that. You're right.
And he was still concussed. But I'm trying to think about how that fight played out in the locker room in December. And once Rob Bolden was in the game, I mean, he hadn't played, I don't think, very much football the last few games or months of the season.
Yeah, the whole thing
wasn't ready.
But Case Keenum knew how to run that offense, man. It was kind of, that speed tempo was not that prevalent back then. Yeah. And they took the legs out of Penn State's. Who are the Penn State pass rushers? I can't remember now.
I'm trying to remember. I think Devin Still was a defensive tackle on that team. I'm trying to remember their defensive ends, and I'm sure
Barnes.
No, it wasn't Barnes. I'm just trying to remember who those guys were.
But that was a pretty formidable pass rush, and they got nothing going. Also, you remember, so it was Case Keenum was the Houston quarterback. Who was the de facto coordinator?
Well, I'm trying to remember, was the head coach?
He's a very well-known, the coordinator, the quarterback coach. He's a very well-known guy now.
I know, but wasn't the head coach, wasn't it that guy, Kevin? Who was the head coach of that team?
Yeah, it was an interim head coach, Tony. I can't remember his last name.
Because the coach left for another job. It was Kevin Sumlin or something?
It might have been Kevin Sumlin left.
All right, who was the OC?
Who was Cliff?
I give up.
Cliff Kingsbury.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That was I spent a couple of days in Mesquite, Texas at Houston practices, which was, believe me, was just a breath of fresh air after the Sandusky standoff and the coaching search and all of that still hadn't played out. And we were at the point where Mike Munchak very easily could have been the next head coach, but he was in week 17 and they were alive for the playoffs against all odds, the Titans. Mm-hmm. And Bud Adams, the owner, finally buttonholed him and said, "Which is it, pal? Are you staying or are you leaving?" And I believe to this day, had the Titans not been in the playoff hunt in week 17, he would have been the head coach, not Bill O'Brien. Anyway, I was over at Houston practices in Mesquite having a great time talking to Cliff Kingsbury because he was fascinating to talk to. And I remembered him from Texas Tech, and you could see the guy had ambition in him. And, people are laughing at the prospect of, say, Dan Mullen being an NFL coach, but I think they have the same, because Mullen's not succeeding right now. Well, Kingsbury was not succeeding at Texas Tech either. And someone saw in him, I don't know, is the young Bidwell still the guy and with the Cardinals who's making the decision?
Michael Bidwell. Yeah. And Steve Keim.
Well, to Steve Keim's credit, I mean, nobody thought that was much of a hire, and look what's happened. I think when you see something in somebody, you don't necessarily have to look at the record. You see what you need, what they bring to the table, what they offer, and if you have a match, you have a match. I think Dan Mullen at Florida, same kind of thing. What are they, 4-5-4 right now, or 4?
They are struggling. He just fired a bunch of coaches too. Yeah. Dave, what do you think? What do you think of Josh Gaddis since he's left Penn State? I think he left Penn State, I think, for Alabama. For a couple of years, and now he's been with Michigan. I think he's been the OC. It's either 2 or 3 years now.
Yes, 3.
What is your read on him? And do you think that what they're doing this year? I think they've made a couple of changes. James referenced that. What do you see from him, and maybe as an OC? And I couldn't tell, but he just kind of he acknowledged Josh Gaddis, but didn't. Usually he just praises all his former coaches. He just kind of glossed over that one.
Well, you remember that was a touchy situation.
Yeah.
And these days, I always go back to how much money you can make going from a position coach to a coordinator, from a coordinator to a head coach. Yursich wants to be a head coach, clearly. And you can quadruple your salary, which didn't used to be true. So Josh is, after the 17 season, he wants to progress. He gets the offer from Alabama. And I think the implicit choice there was, if you want to keep me, you got to make me a coordinator. Well, was he ready to be the coordinator to succeed Moorhead? I don't think so. I don't think so. They chose Ricky Ronnie instead. You could argue that anyway, but was Josh Gaddis ready at that point to be a coordinator? I wouldn't have made that choice. I don't think you could ever blame James Franklin for not making that choice. So he goes to Michigan, and then he's in a weird situation with Jim Harbaugh, who by all accounts is not the easiest guy to work for. I mean, he has had assistants run through Stanford. Very few of them have survived more than 3 years. He's a very oblique, kind of an odd guy. And I imagine you don't always know where you stand. So here's a young, new offensive coordinator, first-time offensive coordinator with essentially Bo Schembechler as his head coach. One of the most conservative guys, ran a conservative scheme, even with a terrific quarterback at Stanford. He did. He ran a really tough
Andrew Luck.
Yeah, he's got Andrew Luck, and he's running a lot of heavy tight end stuff with a blocking back. It worked.
He ran it up good on Pete Carroll that one game.
Yeah. What's your deal? Remember that? What's your deal?
It's like 55-24.
Oh man, and that was I think USC was like 21-point favorites, right?
Yeah,
that was one of the biggest roles in deviant from the line in Vegas history. But the thing is, Gaddis has had a hard job learning how to be a coordinator. He's doing it under Jim Harbaugh. Those are tough circumstances. So he's kind of tried to gradually put in his own stuff, try to humor Harbaugh and do it in a way where it's allowed. But I mean, they've had a lot of tools in that offense over the years. They've had some really good wideouts. Look at what Donovan Peoples-Jones is doing in the NFL. Had a couple touchdowns Sunday. I mean, he's just an example of the kind of guys they've had that they've kind of wasted. Michigan has wasted talent. And when you hear of all the talent that Harbaugh has recruited in his sixth, now seventh year there, that's not a joke, man. He's recruited serious talent, but he doesn't exploit it as other offensive. He's supposed to be an offensive mind. He was supposed to be a quarterback whisperer. What's happened there? I mean, the starting quarterback, Brandon Peters, who won the Penn State game, he was a former 4-star Michigan quarterback recruit. The roster's been littered with guys who are, this is the guy. And Cade McNamara is just the latest version of, this is the guy that's going to get us over the top. And they're really, until the Michigan State game, they really did not prove they could throw the ball. And they did against Michigan State's back seven, which hasn't been able to it's been their Achilles all season. They haven't been able to cover the pass all year. But can they do it against this secondary? I want to see it. I want to see it. I think now you say the key matchups are pass blocking for Penn State, and you're right, with Walker and Wallace against Hutchinson and Ojabo. But I say, if you're Penn State, if you're Brent Pry, don't you just jam the box like crazy and dare them to throw the ball against that secondary. That's what I do.
I love the Brandon Peters 2-point winning throw shout out.
He waited. I
love it. In 9 overtimes, you're like, he won the game. Technically, he did 357 yards rushing. Had a little bit to do with it. Sure. Penn State's playing a guy that was 25% healthy at quarterback also had something to do with it, but I get it.
I'm just saying he was a 4-star recruit out of high school. And he was a washout at Michigan. And that's happened over and over and over.
Sure.
Which, brings us to what you just said is another point that Franklin brought up. He has expected that jumbo set out of the last two. Did you hear that? That Illinois did, and rightfully so. If it worked that well, the 8 and even 9 offensive linemen,
we could see it this week.
I think you might. I mean, you saw it from Michigan.
They're not going to stop it.
No, they commonly had 8 offensive linemen against Indiana. They did it quite a bit. I watched a lot of that tape.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely going to see it. And yet you didn't see it out of either Ohio State and Maryland, which is strange. Yeah.
Dave, I just have to ask you, are you seriously going to go a whole blue-white breakdown podcast without mentioning Shark Face, the nickname? Because it's very out of the ordinary. I'm stunned you haven't used it yet.
He's the most dangerous, ruthless creature in the sea. No,
Jim Harbaugh. That's the nickname you like to.
It's for the power pole. It's only for the power pole because the power pole is supposed to be a little different. We're supposed to have a little.
You've mentioned it the last 3 weeks. All right, Dave. Is there anything else kind of on your plate? Whether
Scott
it was
Frost. We haven't mentioned Scott Frost.
I know.
Come on, talk about my plate. What about your plate? You're the one that texted me.
I just don't want to bore the Penn State audience with it. But I'm sure. I think they hate Nebraska so much that they are probably do want to know just how bad it is at Nebraska. But yeah, Trev Alberts and Scott Frost team up and make a decision. Something's got to give, and it was Scott Frost's entire offensive assistant staff. Essentially, they just. On the same day they announced that Frost would be back in 2022, they just cut ties with like 4 or 5 coaches. It was pretty cold-blooded, Dave.
Bob and I had a text about this. I'll just tell everybody because I didn't see it. I was doing yard work. I usually take Monday and do a lot of other stuff that I can't do on the weekend. And I had not seen it. It was it was Bloody Monday essentially in Nebraska. And when you see these things where 4 or 5 or 6 assistants are all gone
in season,
that immediately says 2 things: that the coach has sold out, the head coach has sold out everyone to save his own hide.
Correct.
2, it very, very probably is not going to work the next season, because if you got a guy who will do that, you got a guy that people cannot count on. That's the way I look at it. Yeah. And we've seen this over and over with guys. This happens a lot in the SEC, where somebody like Butch Jones is doing anything he can to survive, and he is willing to do that, and then he's fired the next year. To me, it's a really bad indicator, and I think you said some things that you're not saying now about Scott.
I cannot say some things in public. I was not happy about it, but it is what it is. And everything you said, I agree with everything you said in the last couple of minutes. Dave, I have to just. No, I'm not trying to change topics, but I do think it's relevant. We also need to point out that John Donovan also got the axe yesterday as Washington's offensive coordinator.
Jeez, I didn't see that. I didn't see it.
Yeah.
No.
They were not scoring points at a prodigious clip this year at Washington. The numbers, I think, were pretty eerily similar to what happened maybe in 2015, his final season at Penn State.
You don't wish anybody
no, I know,
or anything, but isn't it strange how certain guys just keep getting jobs?
You remember certain guys can't get jobs.
They just keep getting these jobs. And it's like, you remember Gene Shue used to be like an Indian for like four different teams, and they just kept hiring him, and he'd go 30. He
had amazing slacks.
38 and 44 everywhere he went,
Yeah, there was a couple of guys. Was Butch Van Bredikoff one of those guys?
There's another one. Yeah. There's another.
But, I do wish John was nothing but nice during his time at Penn State. But I don't know what possessed Jimmy Lake to say, hey, that's the guy. I'm going to stick with him as my OC. Things look pretty good.
Jimmy Lake has his own problems.
Yeah, I know. He does. It's been a bang up show. The jackhammers are starting in the background as we speak, Dave. I'm taking that as a sign that it's time for me to exit stage right.
Mine too. My guy up in our second bedroom upstairs wants to start ripping up the floor some more. He's redoing. We are getting upgrades. Your street isn't getting luxury upgrades, but we're getting luxury upgrades in the flooring up there.
I'm happy not for you. I'm happy for your dog Kaiser, because he's worth it. You're not worth it, Dave. I wouldn't upgrade anything for you, but I would do it for your dog.
He doesn't like slick floors. He doesn't.
I don't like slick floors. Who does? You tear an ACL. Okay, Bob Flounders and Dave Jones. That's it for this Blue-White Breakdown podcast. Just remember, we're probably going to have a special guest for our next one to talk specifically about Dave's favorite coach, Sharkface. Until then, though, you guys have a great Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on when you watch this.
You want to say goodbye?
Dave, I hope your dog's doing well.
He's doing well right here. He wants to get. You want to go out and play? You want to go out and throw the ball?
Oh, look at those ears. They're up.
Let's go. All right. We're going to go.
All right. See you guys soon.